her with a silver tray and a big grin. Doesn't he know how politically incorrect he is? And asks if he can bring her anything. And Harriet says, yes, please, some water. And then he says, my pleasure, and disappears like magic to get it. The big corporation that runs this hotel now must have taught them all to say, my pleasure, like that. Harriet is sure of it. No normal black boy from Memphis would say, my pleasure, on his own. But was it William Faulkner who said Mississippi begins in the lobby of the Peabody Hotel? Or did somebody else say it? Or did she, Harriet Holding, just make that up? At 53, Harriet can't remember anything. Sometimes, of course, it's a blessing. But, for instance, she can't remember the names of her students 5 minutes after the term is over. And she can't remember the names of her colleagues at the community college if she runs into them someplace unexpected, such as the Pizza Hut or Home Depot, as opposed to the faculty lounge or the library, where she's seen them daily for 30 years. Yet suddenly, as if it were only yesterday, Harriet can remember Baby Baloo's beautiful face when she married Charlie Mahan in the biggest wedding Harriet has ever seen to this day. And they were all bridesmaids, Harriet and Anna and Courtney, sweet mates forever. And now they're all gathering again. Oh, it's too much. Just because Harriet took care of Baby Baloo in college does not mean she has an obligation to do so for the rest of her life. Harriet can't remember why she ever consented to do this anyway. Why she ever called Charlie Mahan back when he left that message on her voicemail, considering it was probably all his fault anyway. Yet Charlie Mahan is still charming, clearly. That deep, throaty drawl that always reminds Harriet of driving down a gravel road, the way she and Baby used to do when she went down to Alabama visiting. Joyriding, Baby called it. Harriet has never been joyriding since. Just driving aimlessly out into the country in Baby's convertible, down any road they felt like, past kudzu-covered barns and cotton fields, and little kids who stood in the yard and silently watched them pass and would not wave. Just drinking beer and listening to Wilson Pickett on the radio while bugs died on the windshield and weeds reached in at them on either side, towering goldenrod and bee-balm, Joe Pyeweed, as tall as a man. Like everything else in the Deep South, those weeds were too big, too tangled, too jungly. They'd grow up all around you and strangle you in a heartbeat, Harriet felt. A Virginian, Harriet had always thought she was Southern herself until she went to Alabama with Baby Baloo. And now, here she is again, poised on the lush, dark verge of the Deep South one more time. Harriet thinks of the present the bridesmaids gave Baby the night before her wedding. Sort of a joke present, but not really. Not really a joke at all, as things have turned out. A fancy evening bag, apricot-watered silk. It had belonged to somebody's grandmother. Everything you need to live in the Delta, they had printed on the accompanying card. Inside the purse was a black silk slip and a half-pint of gin. Harriet could use a drink of gin herself just thinking about Baby's thin, flushed face with those cheekbones like wings and her huge, pale, startled blue eyes and the long, dark hair that fell into her face, and how she kept pushing it back in the same obsessive way she bit her nails and smoked cigarettes and did everything else. "Here you are, ma'am," the waiter says, coming back with a beaded crystal goblet of iced water. But when Harriet fishes in her purse for a tip, he waves his hand grandly and glides off, singing out, "My pleasure," in a ringing gospel voice. Harriet fights back an urge to laugh because she knows that if she does, she will never, ever stop. A scholarship student all through school, Harriet often identified more with the blacks she worked alongside in the college dining room than with some of her classmates who had never worked one day in their privileged lives. A black person will tell you the truth, as opposed to rich white Southerners who will tell you whatever they think you'd like to hear. They will tell themselves this, too, before they go ahead and do whatever it was that they wanted to do in the first place. A beautiful, coffee-colored nurse presided over the examination that decided Harriet's recent hysterectomy, shining a flashlight thing around inside Harriet, while 3 white male doctors stood in a row and said, and gravely and professionally. One of them, apparently her primary doctor, looked like he was 12 years old. The doctors were looking at her reproductive tract on a television screen set up right there in the examining room. Harriet, feet up in the stirrups and a sheet wrapped primly around the rest of herself, was watching this television too. It was truly amazing to see her own uterus and ovaries and fallopian tubes and everything thrown up on the screen like a map. It was a miracle of modern medicine, and so, oddly enough, it was not personally embarrassing to Harriet at all. In fact, it was like she wasn't even there. The doctors discussed the mass on her ovaries, which they couldn't actually see due to the fibroid tumors in her uterus. They opined significantly. Then the doctors withdrew, walking in a straight white line out the door to consult privately among themselves. The nurse, who had said not a word during the entire examination, turned to Harriet. She cocked her head and raised one elegant eyebrow. "Listen here, honey," she announced. "In my line of work, I've seen about 1,000,000 of these, and I want to tell you something. If I was you, I'd get the whole damn thing took out." Harriet did just that. She'd been bleeding too much for years anyway. Somehow the phrase, bleeding heart liberal, comes into her mind. But a person can get used to anything, and so she'd gotten used to it, used to feeling that tired and never having much energy, and having those hot flashes at the most inopportune times. "Didn't all these symptoms interfere with your sex life?" the young doctor had asked her at one point. "I don't have a sex life," Harriet told him, realizing as she spoke that this was true. It has been true for years. The phrase, "use it or lose it," comes into her mind. Well, the truth is, she didn't mind losing it. In many ways, it has been a relief, though Harriet always thought she'd have children eventually. She always thought she'd marry. Harriet is still surprised, vaguely, that these things have not happened to her. It's just that she's been so busy, taking care of everybody. First Jill, then Mama, then starting the comeback program at her school, sponsoring the newspaper and the yearbook, and of course, her students have been her children in a way. She sees them now, sprinkled all across the Shenandoah Valley, everywhere she goes. "Hello, Miss Holding, hello, Miss Holding." Their bright voices cry from their strangely old faces. She can't remember one of them. Time has picked up somehow, roaring along like a furious current, out of control. If she hadn't had the hysterectomy, would she ever have agreed to Charlie Mahan's request? Would she have gone along with this crazy scheme? Somehow, she doesn't think so. But it's true that things started seriously slipping over a year ago, even before she consulted the gynecologist. She just didn't feel like herself. Her mind started wandering, for one thing. For instance, she might arrive in Charlottesville for a meeting without even the faintest memory of having driven all the way over there, what route she took, and so forth. She might walk from her living room into her kitchen and then just stand there, wondering what she'd come for, wondering what she'd had in mind. Her friend Phyllis called it the change. A big, bossy woman who teaches accounting at the college with Harriet. Phyllis has already gone through the change, all by herself. "You've got to go with the flow, change with the change," she advised Harriet. "Try some zinc." "Or maybe a man," Harriet surprised herself by saying. The words flew right out of her mouth. "Why, Harriet!" Phyllis was as surprised as she was. Phyllis herself doesn't want a man, she's announced, because if she got one now, she'd probably just end up taking care of him, and then he'd just die on her. "Men are like mayflies," Phyllis says. But Harriet had found herself thinking about them anyway. Sometimes she woke up at night with her body on fire thinking about them.